What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Shoot the Gap, the IDP show here at Fantasy and Frames and on the Fantasy and Frames podcast. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and with me we got JT, Justin Taylor, as always. And this week we're getting you ready for week 4 of the IDP Fantasy Football season. We promise it won't be 2 hours like last week, or maybe it will. We'll find out. See you after the short break. Yes, folks, it has been, I would say in terms of injuries, we all know how it's been on the offensive side of the ball. Well, injuries are starting to plague the defensive side of the ball. There's just so much. It's really a game of attrition. And I have no idea what figure out what the cause is. Is it just preseason is just not what it used to be? There's not enough conditioning, or it's just really, really bad luck? I mean, I don't even know where to start with that, but we'll get into some news and notes when we talk about injuries a little bit later. But first and foremost, JT, how was it seeing your Colts defense up close and personal this past weekend?
Well, they played a little bit better than they had in the first couple weeks. I tell you what, for IDP purposes, you want all the Colts players right now. They are on the field constantly. They're getting 1 million snaps a game. I think they've got 3 guys in the top 6 or 7 in tackles in the league. So for IDP, it's great if you're a fan of the team and you want your defense to get off the field for a 3 and out. They are not your team right now. They are struggling to get off the field. I like all their players, but it was an ugly game. Definitely early on, but at least the Bears made a game of it late. At least it was a fun game. It ended up being close at the end. So me and a bunch of the guys went to the game and had a good time. So it was fun. And then, I'm not sure I'm totally ready for this yet, but Steelers Colts this weekend. So I'm like, man, they couldn't spread it out the fun for me a little bit. I'm dragging a little bit here this week, and now I got to get right back on the horse and get back to Indy for the Steelers game to watch what is a legitimate defense that has played, I think, almost half the amount of plays that the Colts have played on defense this year. So getting a little bit of both worlds this week. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on that one.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. In one of my leagues, it came down to choosing for a defense special teams, either the Colts or the Bears. And I was like, this is such a tough decision. And so I ended up going with the Bears. And obviously that didn't work out in the end by much. But every, Bears interception of Anthony Richardson, which was, plentiful this past week, I was like, yes. And then every missed attempt by the Bears to capitalize on. I was like, damn it. So it was an ugly game defensively. If you play in leagues which are defense special teams, which shame on you. Shame on you if you do that. You should be playing IDP. But man, just crazy week, a lot of injuries. Let's just get right down to it. Let's
get this pain out of the way. Let's talk about some of these, because some of these are huge ones for IDP purposes. That's for sure.
All right, let's hit these people with some news and notes. All right, heading into Week 4's matchup, specifically on Sunday Night Football, we got Terrell Bernard again missing this game at linebacker, and Taron Johnson, the slot cornerback, out versus the Baltimore Ravens. Balen Spector. Balen Spector was a hot name last week for the Buffalo Bills in terms of linebacking situation. We go into what he did this past week. He actually played the majority of snaps, JT, at the linebacker position, playing 80.3% of the defensive snap share. Dorian Williams, the guy that we at one point thought was going to be the LB1, apparent LB1 when the Bernard injury happened, he only played 59%. That's no good. And But here's the thing. He was super efficient. He had a tackle efficiency of 21.4% compared to Spector's 10.5%. Going forward, though, are you trusting efficiency or are you trusting opportunity in this situation for IDP?
Oh, this one bothers me a lot. I think Dorian Williams is a better player. Now, the Bills aren't seeing that with the snap share right now, but I think Dorian Williams is a better player. He still was able to get you 10 tackles, even though he didn't play a lot of snap share. And I have to tell you, I'm trying to be careful about not getting too crazy about snap share early in the year. Usually that's the biggest thing, IDP. But we've seen go depending on the game plan. We've seen some games where guys have gone way down on certain games and they snap right back the next week. I think we're going to see a little more out of Dorian Williams going forward. I was a little surprised to see the snap share percentages with them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it is, one of those things where, yes, I understand opportunity reigns supreme, volume is a huge thing, but I mean, there is a huge discrepancy between 21.4% and 10.5%, especially when you're given that much opportunity. To squander that a little bit is a little concerning. Um, obviously, this was a very one-sided game for the Buffalo Bills versus Jacksonville, so there was some decrease in overall snap playing time for these guys, because why did they need to be on the field when Buffalo and Josh Allen are eviscerating these Jaguars, or Jaguars if you're in the UK. I'm sure that's not how they say it in the UK. I was just trying to do my best.
I had to be honest. I was like, oh, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say it. I was like, that's pretty good of you that you kind of know that. So I wouldn't have called you out if you wouldn't have said anything.
Anybody in the UK watching, please comment and let us know.
I constantly do hear people complain about how people say Jaguars, whereas Jaguars or Jaguars. And I feel like people, no matter what, people are always mad at the other person saying they're saying it wrong. So I don't know if there is 100% correct way to say it. Depends on where you're from, I guess.
Yes. Did you know everywhere else in the world but the United States, they pronounce aluminium aluminium?
I did not know that, but I'm not surprised. We do say
Doesn't
some stuff that is like,
better?
yeah, it's like we do say some stuff that I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense why we say it that way and someone else says it totally different. But
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love our language, America. But I will say, aluminium, it just sounds very hoity-toity and fancy. I kind of like it. Not gonna lie.
It does sound fancy. Just like if you're talking about your aluminum can, and you said it that way instead, you're like, oh, this is a very fine, nice piece of equipment here.
Exactly. Exactly. Jamie in the chat brings up somebody we are going to save till last because that was the most recent news. But let's just pull off the Band-Aid now.
Yeah, folks, might as well.
Yeah, Alex Singleton, linebacker, stud tackling machine. A top 10 linebacker in fantasy on most formats, definitely with Fantasy Pro scoring top 12 each and every year. Tore his ACL. He's on IR for the Denver Broncos. And just when I thought I was out on Cody Barton, he just pulls me back in. He just pulls me back in.
Really, you're right back in. You can't help. You can't quit him.
No, and it's crazy because, Singleton, I think you were telling me the story because I didn't see the actual Broncos game. You were telling me earlier before we came on air that Singleton ended up playing the entire game. He
ended up playing 100% of snaps. He tore his ACL in the first quarter. Once they got after the game, they talked it over and they're like, when did you get hurt? He's like, oh, somebody got me in the first quarter. And they're like, you played the whole game? He's like, yeah. And he played every snap, played 100% of snaps. So I actually was researching because he was in my plays and fades because I was predicting a monster week for him this week. And then all of a sudden I saw it and I was like, how in the world did I miss the news that he tore an ACL on Sunday? Well, it's because they didn't figure it out till just now. Like late last night, early this morning, did they figure out that he actually had tore his ACL, played the entire game, still got double-digit tackles, and now is out for the rest of the season, which is pretty devastating for IDP players.
Just, I mean, you feel bad for the guy, right? Because all he does is make plays all over the field, but
playing a whole NFL game on a torn ACL and playing well is pretty freaking impressive.
Yeah, I think Cody Barton does what Cody Barton does and comes to the rescue while wildly inefficient. He is the next guy up, I think, here for fantasy purposes. Is there anybody else for this Broncos linebacking core that people may want to pay attention to, or is it the Cody Barton?
We can bring up the guy Jamie asked about here. He's talking about Just Strand. He's seeing like, hey, maybe that's the guy. Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll go.
Yep, you got it. I think we got double clicked it. Yeah, we got a double click there. So that's the question: is whether is there somebody else that goes? I think you're right. I think you got to go Cody Barton here. While inefficient, is going to make plays, and for IDP purposes, is going to get you points. I think that's the way to go, at least for right now. I know the new guy, whoever it is always like the guy. Oh, maybe he comes in and plays out of his mind. For me, I'm probably going Barton over Strand. Now, I'm not saying that Strand can't be okay. I mean, he's a fifth round pick from 2020, so it's not like he's a new guy in the league. I'm gonna go with what I know, and I'm gonna go with Cody Barton if I'm picking up one of those two guys. If you're in just an absolute deep IDP league where there's like no linebackers on the waiver wire, I think Strand's worth a pickup just in case if you got room on your team.
And I think this is precisely the situation that Jamie finds himself in right now. He's in a 32-team league, lost Alex Singleton. So, by default, he has to go this route. And so, we'll find out. Honestly, yes, I think it's better to get ahead of the curve and pick up these guys who haven't shown a lot of anything and due to lack of playing time, especially with Barton not being available. So, yeah, if you have the bench space and you have, pick him up, throw him on there. That's like, what's the worst that could happen? You drop him next week for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, let him sit around, see if he plays some, see what matriculates there, and go that route. Especially in a big league like that, I'm absolutely picking him up and holding him and see if I can get something out of him.
100%. Thanks, Jamie, for the comment. Let's go to Rugaroo. Rugaroo, what's going on, man? Welcome back. I'm late to the party, but have you guys talked about Myles Garrett? No, but let's talk about Myles Garrett. He had 2 bad feet heading into last week. We saw him, end up having to be escorted off the field or helped off the field a little bit this past Sunday versus the New York Giants. Heading over to ESPN's injury report, it says Coach Stefanski said Wednesday he doesn't see Garrett, who's dealing with a foot, an Achilles, and a thigh injury. Good Lord. Who is not practicing this week, being ruled out for Sunday's road matchup against the Raiders. Maybe he should be, right?
Yeah.
maybe he deserves a break here and there, especially for this. The question is, though, and I guess this is what all fantasy managers want to know is, JT, are you giving him a break on your starting roster and putting him on your bench? Now, granted, you'd have to have like an embarrassment of riches at the defensive line position to even think about doing so. But are you willing to take a streaming option at this point, or are you rolling with Garrett?
Depending on where I'm at, I mean, if you're in a league that you're really struggling on defensive ends, or you don't have, you're in a league that has a shallow bench, so maybe you don't have a guy just sitting there that you can put in and play, then maybe I'm just probably going to roll with Garrett. But if I'm in a league, like I'm in a couple leagues where you've got to start 2 DNs every week, so almost always you have 4 or 5 on your team because just bye weeks, everything else that happens. If I'm in that type of situation, if I have anyone I think can have a good game and is getting solid snap share, I'm considering it. Now, you hate to sit a guy like that, but you already have a guy that's dealing with injuries. How much does he? I'm always nervous with those guys because if they nick something up, they're just going to go out. And then you're going to get yourself a Joey Bosa situation where he plays 2 snaps against the Steelers. And I was looking at him the whole time before the game, and I had other good options. And I'm like, do I play him? I'm like, he's going on against a tackle that's really struggling. And I was looking at it, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to take the chance that he aggravates something and goes out. You know what? 2 plays in, he's out for the rest of the game. I'm always really nervous of those pass rushers. The pass rush guys, man, they really need to be at elite feeling great to get around the edge and use their speed. And if they don't have it, they're just not. And he's not a high tackle guy either. So you're looking at like, man, I got to have a sack or 2 out of him if I'm going to get something most of the time. So to me, it depends on your roster. If I have someone else that I think is solid, is obviously not as good as Garrett, but if I have someone that's solid, I'm going to play him probably. because this is a lot of injuries. I mean, it's a lot of things that he could easily re-aggravate and get in the game. And if you look at last week, per PVFF, he only played 56% of the snap shares as it was. So he already, and now, great win rate, pass rush rate, all that stuff that he always has. But again, he wasn't playing a ton of defense because of that. I would see the same thing. I could even see a situation where they hold him out most plays and just bring him in pure pass rush situations.
If you are so inclined to, and it sucks to say it, but to put Myles Garrett on your bench, or maybe you don't have Myles Garrett, but you want maybe the next guy up. Agbonia Okoronkwo, as Nate and I called him years ago, OGOK, as we were looking for nicknames, which I think is still an awesome nickname. He's not a horrible, fill-in here. Even last week versus the Giants, he had 3 tackles and a sack for 10.3 fantasy points. So, I mean, not horrible, right? But
you could do worse. You could definitely do worse. And I like I said, I think he could end up seeing a lot more share this week where they're just playing Garrett when they absolutely need him in big situations. I would be shocked if he plays a ton. I really would. If these injuries are as bad as they're looking like, and he's got multiple of them, man, nothing makes me. It's maybe just my adverseness in fantasy football. Nothing frustrates me more than playing a guy that they already say is hurt. I go ahead and play him anyway, and then he plays like a quarter and then barely touches the field the rest of the game because he re-aggravates something. It just drives me nuts.
Really grinds my gears. I hear you.
That's right.
I wish we had that Family Guy drop, but we don't want to get sued. So, but anyhow, let's keep going here. This one hurts me so much because I was looking forward to him coming back this season from a knee injury he sustained in the preseason. I thought he was going to be the Carl Granderson this year of 2024. Malcolm Kuntz, edge rusher for the Las Vegas Raiders, was placed on season-ending IR with a knee surgery. So, yeah, Tyree Wilson, Charles Snowden, have fun with that. It's only Max Crosby on that defensive line, as well as Christian Wilkins. And even though Christian Wilkins, not the greatest win rate or pressure rate, only 9.4 and 6.3 last week. So I think you could do better than Christian Wilkins, to be perfectly honest with you. And honestly, I think it's just Max Crosby you really want to care about for fantasy purposes going forward. Let's talk about, here's a guy that is surprising. And you know what? I'm going to use this week's victory over the Cincinnati Bengals to carry my bias into this next one. Next player, Cleveland Farrell, Washington, was actually playing really well. Speaking of the Raiders, right? Former first-round pick of the Raiders in the John Gruden era. Had a couple of spots. I forget where he was last year, but I think he was with the Chargers last year. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. He's with Washington.
He was San Francisco at some point. I thought so. I'm almost sure he was at San Francisco.
He's the journeyman. Let's just put it like that. Well, he landed in the nation's capital this year, and he was actually playing really okay for fantasy purposes. Not going to be playing this week versus the Cardinals. Alex Highsmith has already been ruled out for Week 4 versus your Indianapolis Colts, and I guess it's both your Steelers and Colts here. What do you make of the situation here for the defensive edge rushers for Pittsburgh?
I tell you what, and we're going to talk about him a little bit farther down in the show, but Nick Herbig, the second-year defensive end out of Wisconsin, is lightning in a bottle, man. This guy, when he gets on the field, he just wreaks havoc. He just gets around the corner. It's like you're watching a mini TJ Watt. It's like he's watched TJ Watt in practice. It's like, I'm just going to do exactly what that guy does. And he maybe not be quite as talented as TJ, but this guy's got some freaking skills. And why I don't want to see Alex Highsmith hurt. I am really excited to see what Herbig can do in a game where he plays an entire game, because he's really just been a guy who rotates in with Highsmith and TJ Watt to give him like a series off every 2 or 3 series. But him playing, he played the whole second half against the Chargers and was phenomenal. And we'll go over that here in just a little bit of what are some of his stats in that game. But I'm liking Herbig. If he's out there in your league, especially in a league that gives you a pretty high point total for sacks and forced fumbles and pressures. He's your guy. I'm picking him up and playing him, and I'm not even hesitant on playing him. I'm playing over him some fairly decent sized studs at DN. I just think he actually is going to be a monster this week.
You got Jamie in the chat saying smash that like button. Yes, please do smash that like button. And if you're over on YouTube, or even if you're not, head over to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button as well, so you're notified when Fantasy and Frames cranks out all the content. And I mean like all the content. Like you name it, we got it. And we got really good content creators and analysts. And speaking of amazing content creators and analysts, we got Drew Scott here in the chat, best in the IDP game. Thank you so much, man. Really enjoyed you on Fourth and Frames with Ruett Manuel and Nate Markham, which you can catch every week at 9 p.m. Eastern here on the Fantasy and Frames channel and networks. Yes, Nick, is it Herbig? Did I say that correctly? Herbig?
Yeah, Herbig. And his brother actually plays O-line for the Steelers as well. They love to get the family members. That's kind of the Steelers deal with the Haywards and some of these other guys. But yeah, they've got that Wisconsin connection. They've had a couple coaches that were friends with other coaches of Wisconsin, and they've really hit Wisconsin hard the last couple of years, getting TJ Watt from there. They got Keanu Benton, their nose tackles from there, Herbig's from there. So they've got some guys that maybe were a little underrated going into the draft that they just kind of had some inside info on, and they've really liked a lot of those guys. And Herbig, I think is going to be a guy to keep your eyes out, because if he was on another team, I think he would be a guy a lot of people would want. It would be starting on a lot of other teams that didn't have Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt.
Okay, well, going to the Fantasy and Frames IDP Dynasty League right now and picking up Nick Herbig as he's available. Drew Scott, don't you even think about going and getting into your roster?
I was trying to do it last night. As I was writing our plays and fades article for fantasyandframes.com, and I was trying to get in there and see what leagues I didn't have them in already and pick them up while not trying to spend too much time as I was trying to get my article
done. Which, by the way, you can check out his article, JT's article, it is with plays and fades, tomorrow morning over at fantasyandframes.com. Definitely go check that out. Yes, thank you. He's available. Woohoo! Sorry, everybody at Fantasy and Frames, but not sorry. Just one more thing on Nick Herbig. Amongst all linebacker eligible players in Fantasy Pros rankings, he was the LB1 of the week. He was the LB or defensive lineman 2 of the week. The guy is just fantastic. Good call there.
I tell you, the people that watch him, you're gonna feel like you're seeing another like a smaller, lighter TJ Watt. I mean, he has definitely been soaking up everything that TJ Watt does. Because like you go out there and watch him on film, and you're like, wait, what number is that guy? I mean, he does look like TJ Watt. He's taken a lot. He's learned a lot from him, and it's so far. I mean, a young guy that I think he's going to be really good in the future. All he needs is more playing time. That's it.
So it's funny in the Fantasy and Frames Dynasty chat. I literally just picked up Herbig as we've been talking, and Drew Scott jumps in the chat. He's like, "I literally just came here from the show to pick him up. God damn you!"
And of course, I think that's the one I'm in. I think I didn't even pick him up. I should have picked. I think I missed him in their league. Dang it! That's what I get. Too many leagues. Shoot.
Love you, Jamie. Talking about all the analysts here at Fantasy and Frames, making the picture clear, crystal clear on both sides of the ball. We appreciate you. Juwan Bentley, New England Patriots. He is out, or at least he is on IR. Jelani Tavai, we saw him step up into that role. And when I mean that role, I mean like that ass-kicking, tackling role that you want to see out of your linebackers when given.
Yeah, Tavai's a play. I mean, he should be on everybody's roster, but if he's not on a roster, I picked him up last year in a bunch of leagues where people just weren't 100% sure about him. And he's one of those guys, like if you got him on your roster, you're playing him right now. Now is the absolute time to plug him in.
Now, Raekwon McMillan came in last week, and he did play 72% or close to 73% of the snaps.
Mm-hmm.
It had a tackle efficiency of 20%. Are you buying the dip on Raekwon McMillan, or is it still just the value you want for doing one?
I want Savai for sure. Again, McMillan's another guy. I think he had a nice game, and it was just one of those situations where they were down and they were, the team was running against them constantly. He's another one of those guys. Like if you're in a deep league and linebackers are short, and you have some of these guys that we're talking about tonight that are injured, he's a guy I would go after. Because here's the thing: is I think New England's going to be down a lot this year. While they played pretty decent so far, I think a lot of teams are going to run against them. And so I want all the linebackers and the strong box safeties that I can get on New England because I think a lot of those guys are going to be able to put up some stats.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I'm sorry. I am so enamored with just picking up everywhere I can in the
Dude, he's like, guys, pause the show. I'm gonna get on all my.
Yeah.
I gotta pick him up right now everywhere. I gotta get him. He's my guy.
Yeah, fantasy first here, as we like to call it here. Okay, let's jump in.
We got to listen to our own advice, right? We can't turn around and not listen to our the things we're telling everybody to do.
We got Tent Ganja over in our YouTube chat asking offense question.
I'm answering him. I'm answering him right now. If there's an offensive question, I will answer it in the chat. I'm answering it for him right now.
There you go. See, we'll help you out in the chat. We like to keep on air stuff to strictly IDP. If you have IDP questions, so feel free to ask, whether you're new or not. We'd love to answer them. But while JT is answering that, let's get ready for some money or mirage. All right, JT, I got two questions for us, or I got basically one question for us this week because we spent so much time last week. We went over like 2 hours of IDP talk, and while we do appreciate people who stood with us all night long as we were talking IDP, we're gonna shorten it this week. And I think this is a question that if you're a New Yorker or a New York fan, you will definitely have an appreciation for this question. So let me get the question out here. In week 3, both Will McDonald of the Jets and Quinnen Williams had pressure rates of 18.2% and 27.8% respectively. McDonald had 2 sacks on the day, and Williams had 1. Okay? Now, for the New York Giants, Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence had pressure rates of 82% and 17.5%. Burns had a sack, Lawrence had 2. Money or mirage? And again, this is one of these like season outlook things. Okay? Money mirage. Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams will be the far superior duo of all the New York teams at defensive line when it comes to football statistics and fantasy football statistics this season.
Man, this is a tough one. I tell you what, I was a big McDonald fan coming out of college. I just like, man, he just needs some time to get in there. Quinnen Williams, a stud. I'll tell you what, Dexter Lawrence, I will say he was on my plays list last week. So Dexter Lawrence has been looking really good. I was like, hey, play him in a D-line league. I was like, if he's in a D-tackle league, you absolutely have to smash him. You got to play him no matter what. But I was like, even just a D-line league, I was like, I love Dexter Lawrence this week. He has looked really good for the Giants. I like him a lot. I tell you what, I like Lawrence slightly over Quinnen Williams, but I like McDonald better than Brian Burns. Brian Burns had his best game last week. He kind of stepped it up a notch as he had been kind of quiet to start the year. But, man, I really like what McDonald's bringing. And here's the difference maker for me. I see this Jets team leading a lot of games where these guys are going to get pass rushing opportunities. The Giants lucked out last week that the Browns O-line just looked terrible. And then they were in that game the whole way. That allowed them to get more pressures and get on Deshaun Watson, who was just not getting rid of the football whatsoever. He was taking sacks everywhere. I'm leaning the Jets duo this year. If I had to take that duo, I'm going to take them. I think it's very close, but I love what McDonald's doing. And at this point, they've got to stick with him because he's looked great. And then, like I said, I think Quinnen Williams is right there with Dexter Lawrence. I think Dexter Lawrence is slightly having the better year, but I'll take the Jets duo.
All right, let me ask you now another question. And this one's going to go to Philadelphia at the linebacking position. Money Mirage. We've seen Zach Bond since week 1 just go absolutely crazy. Week 1, he had 15 total tackles. Week 2, he had 9 total tackles. Week 3, he had 13 total tackles. Money Mirage, he finishes as a top 12 linebacker in fantasy football this year.
Ooh, I actually saw a couple of people asking, like, would you take Bond over some really highly drafted guys? And I was a little shocked that a bunch of people were like, absolutely, I'm taking Bond over that guy. I was like, man, I got to really think this over now. I don't know if I would. And then I was like, maybe I should think about this a little bit longer. I thought you were going to say, am I going to take him over a certain player? And I was going to be like, oh, man, you're going to make this hard on me. I do think he can finish top 12. I definitely do. Just the way the Eagles defense is playing right now, he has to make plays. It's not great right now. Oh, excuse me there. And I think he's up there. There's no one else that's going to take this job. I mean, he would have to get hurt, I think, not to finish that high. I definitely think he's a top 10 to 12 guy. Is he outplaying himself right now a little bit? I think maybe hair. I don't know if he's going to finish his linebacker 1 or 2. I think he might be playing a little out of his mind right now, but I don't think he's going to have that big of a drop off. That I definitely think he can be in that top 10, 12, 15 range for sure.
All right, last one, the Mirage question. This one is very. It's one that I never thought I would be like, "Ooh, this is a hard question per se," because I thought it was going to be a slam dunk here. New York Giants linebacker Bobby Okereke, total defensive snap share 100%, had a tackle efficiency of 9% in week 3, total tackles 6 for PFF. Micah McFadden played only in 71 or close to 72% of snaps, had a higher tackle efficiency of 10.4 and 5. Let me go pull up here the stats on the season here. Linebacker fantasy points per game. Okereke is the LB 36 with 7 solos, 12 assisted for 11.5 points. And then Micah McFadden is not too far behind with 13 solos, so 6 assists. So the ratio is flipped here, averaging a total of 16.3 points. Is Micah McFadden the linebacker you want to roster from the New York Giants now?
I think that's a little bit of a mirage there on that. I want Okereke still. I would rather have him. I think long term. I know McFadden's had some nice plays. He had a really nice blitz and got a sack in the Browns game. I think that definitely helped him out. I still Okereke is just a really talented guy. I know he's way down as far as fantasy scoring right now for this year. I think he picks that back up. I think he gets back more into the type of player he's really been the last 3 or 4 years. It's just kind of been a funky start to the season for a lot of guys. And I'm trying to do my best not to overreact and chase some of these guys that have had nice early games and then give up on some of the studs we know about that just haven't got off to a great start. So for me, I'm sticking with my guy Okereke for the year.
I want to throw a couple of comments here in the YouTube chat that you just love to see. Mr. Scampers, first of all, Mr. Scampers loves all the Fantasy and Frames programming. You see him every show in the chat. It feels like he's like, I don't know anything about defense, but these guys seem to know about this stuff. And we got Jamie back in the chat saying, these guys help me win all my IDP leagues. Thank you very much. Mr. Scampers, big fan. Seriously, we appreciate your support. We appreciate all your support, people who are here watching us tonight, listening in podcast form and going back on YouTube and watching. Just the support you show everybody here at Fantasy and Frames means a lot. And, you know, the support that you show JT and I here on Shoot the Gap, as well as all of our written content over at fantasyandframes.com. There's not enough words to say thank you. There are some words, though, that are kind of important here as we get into our next segment. And, there are 2. I guess there's 3. Ready? You know what those 3 words are? Plays and fades. And of course, as always, folks, if you have any questions, please throw them in the comments. If they're offense questions, JT will answer them in the chat. If they're IDP questions, we, of course, will throw them up on the screen and talk to you and give you our analysis here. Last week, we do this every week. We do defensive linemen, we do linebackers, we do defensive backs. We give you a play and a fade at each of these positions. And I kind of want to go back to a couple positions here. Well, especially like the defensive line position from last week, because linebackers, when it comes to fantasy point scoring, there's like a pretty like comparable distribution. Like you get like the upper, 20, you get the low 20s with the elite linebackers in terms of fantasy pros IDP scoring points. Then you get like the mid to high teens. You get some 12s thrown in there. And then there's a whole bunch of like 10s to 10.3 to 10.5s, right? And that'll take you to like the LB 50, right? Right. So there's a lot of like in between here. But I will say the harder positions to pick, at least from my perspective, the harder position to pick for success rate is defensive line. And I'm happy to say we killed it last week on plays and fades. And, I don't normally like to brag, but I think, JT, you hit it out of the park. Keon White, New England Patriots, 6 total tackles, 8.3 fantasy points. He was Keon White. It wasn't his highest point total of the week, but it was still decent enough for a defensive lineman. That was your play. Your fade, Pat Jones, only had 2 tackles for 4.8 points. So you did the viewers solid. You told them who to avoid. You told them who to put into your lineup. That's called winning right there, folks. So good job there.
Thank you, sir.
I had in my play, I had Boye Mafe, 3 solos, a sack, a pass deflections for 12.5 points. I told you to fade Alex Highsmith. I get it. He got injured. Don't take a victory lap on the injury. I'm not going to take a victory lap on the injury. I will say that he got 1.5 fantasy points, and technically that's not great. But I'm not going to take a victory lap on the injury. I'm not going to say I won.
Think it was a nice fade though, because I like I said the week before, I took Alex Highsmith, and it was like my gut feeling, because he's about an every 3rd or 4th game guy. I hate to say that, but he just is. He'll have a real nice game, and then he kind of disappears for 2 or 3 games. I was with you on the fade, because I was like, he got a sack the week before. I felt like he was going to get one, and I was like, oh, we're going to go back to 1 tackle Alex Highsmith today. So I loved what you did there. Obviously, you can say, oh, well, Herbig came in and he played really well in his spot. I don't think Highsmith gets the sacks that Herbig got in that game. So I think it was still was a good call for you on the fade on Alex Highsmith.
Well, you look at Highsmith's win rate, which is not exactly high, going against the tackles for the Chargers. It wasn't a good matchup to begin with, and you don't like to see people get hurt. So I'm not going to count that. But Herbig, going back to him, folks, we're going to talk about him all show. We're just going to find a way to throw his name into all the shows. If he is on your waiver wire for IDP leagues, Nick Herbig, sort by Pittsburgh Steelers, pick him up, throw him in your starting lineup. Just have him on your team. This is the guy you want. This is a money name, not a mirage name, a money name. But let's go into defensive lineman for this week, JT. Who do you got for us?
Nick Herbig, baby. That's my guy this week. I love Herbig. I'm sticking with him. Let me just break down a little bit of the numbers for you for Herbig last week. And this is kind of how ridiculously well he played. So after he came in for the injured Highsmith, he ended up playing 100% of the snaps in the second half. He had a 95.4 PFF grade, which was number 1. He had a 50% win rate and a 37.5 pressure rate. Absolute elite numbers. Ended up with 2 sacks and a forced fumble. On top of that, he was lighting it up. I mean, he was coming around the corner with so much speed. He was making every play just a gigantic sack fumble in that game. He just played unreal in the second half. I mean, obviously, those are unsustainable numbers, but even if he drops those numbers in half, they're still elite numbers. He's still at the top of the chain, even if he goes in half of that. I just think the thing is, with all the pressure that TJ Watt puts on a team, the guy on the other side has a chance to really do some damage. I think Alex Smith occasionally takes advantage of that. I think Nick Herbig's really going to take advantage of that. Now, the Colts haven't thrown the ball a lot, so this is a little bit more of a gut call by me, as the O-line for the Colts have been pretty solid, but we've seen AR hold the ball a little bit. We've seen people get back there to him. I think the speed of Herbig and Watt coming off the corners is going to force the Colts to do some things. I think Herbig gets home again, and he's a guy that just doesn't stop too. So he can get you tackles. He's not just a sack guy. He will drop into coverage. He will do some different things. I'm excited to see him get 100% snap share this week.
Comment from Mr. Scampers. Thoughts on punters being included in IDP leagues? They are the first play in the defensive game. Would you put a punter in your IDP league there?
I have to tell you, I played in my first IDP league as one of the Fantasy Cares charity leagues that they actually had punters this year and gave points for like punts inside the 20. It was a really funky scoring league this year. And I actually grabbed a couple punters. I was like, we'd never done the scoring. So I was like, yeah, we'll see if these guys score any points. I have to tell you, a couple of my punters are scoring me double-digit points every game, while some of my other players aren't scoring me anything. They've actually, I think, when my punter outscored both my quarterbacks last week in the Fantasy Cares Eliminator. So it's not a big thing I would get into. If you did a league that was just kind of a funky scoring league with a bunch of different stuff, this league does a head coach position too, where you get like, it was actually a negative. If you get a coach that gets a loss, you get 10 points. So it's like it's this kind of a funky scoring league. So I think if you did something like that, I could totally see it. But there's so many anti-kicker people. I think you'd have a hard time finding enough people that'd be like, oh, sure, let's throw punters in the mix. So I think you have to have some hardcore fantasy players that just want to do something a little different.
I hear that. Let me throw out a name for a play this week. If my fade doesn't play, and so I'm kind of cheating with my fade because they're both on the same team. My play here is Tuli Pelotu of the Los Angeles Chargers. Say that 3 times fast. Defensive lineman. Basically, he's Joey Bosa's backup. Joey Bosa hurt his back up again. I know that wasn't my best, folks. I'm sorry. And in his place comes Tuli, and he only gave you 4 total tackles, but he gave you 9.5 fantasy points. That's kind of what you're hoping for. And looking at his efficiency metrics this past week, he was dominating his win rate at 15.8%, right behind Khalil Mack. On the flip side, even if Joey Bosa plays, how much can you trust Joey Bosa anymore? Like, I feel like this is kind of like a changing of the guard year, and you hate to see it because he had such a great start to his career. In the middle of his career, things kind of went downhill in terms of the consistency due to injury. One year he gets injured, the next year he's all pro. The year after that he gets injured, the following year he's all pro. Now everything just seems to be catching up with him, and you hate to see the decline in a player. However, it is what it is. So Tuli Pelotu is definitely somebody I think has a good matchup this week. Just good in general.
I have to tell you, I love him. In one of my leagues, I have Herbig backing up Alex. I actually have TJ Watt, Alex Smith, or Alex Highsmith, and Herbig. I have Tui too in that league. I like him a ton. He's a lot like Herbig. When he actually gets the snap share, he has been really good. He's got talent. He just hasn't been able to get out there full time because of the guys in front of him or experienced veterans and make a lot of money. So he's kind of, that guy's playing behind. But I tell you what, I've got him on quite a few rosters. When I know he's going to get a high percentage of the snap share, I throw him in my lineup a lot of times because I really like what he is and what he can do. He has really impressed me so far in his young career.
I've got a question here from Rugaroo. Here's a general rule question. How do you determine whether to play a defensive end / edge versus mobile quarterbacks? For example, he has Gregory Rousseau going against Lamar this weekend on Sunday Night Football. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. Let me not phrase it like that. their coverage abilities have to be pretty top notch, right? So I would probably look for a weak side linebacker on the team to be the one that you'd want to start instead of the middle linebacker. Now, it just so happens, or I'm sorry, you were talking about defensive end. I apologize.
Yeah.
Man, that is such a tough question.
Yeah, I was going to jump in, like, it is kind of tough. Some of the mobile quarterbacks, just because they're mobile and they run doesn't mean they don't take sacks. Lamar is not a guy that takes a ton of sacks, but he runs well. But then I look at the other thing. The other side is like Patrick Mahomes. He's not really a runner per se, but man, he's a tough guy to get sacked. He just reads defense and moves around well. So I don't know. I don't know if it's always mobile. It's kind of like I said earlier with Anthony Richardson for the Colts. Even though he's not going to throw a ton, he is a runner. I still think Herbig has a shot to get home this week against him. Because sometimes those guys that run, they hold the ball too much because they know they are active and run and kick moves. So just because they're a pure runner doesn't mean I'm going like, okay, I'm not ever going to play defensive edge guys against because they're never going to get sacks. I really look at the sack total for them. Lamar's been pretty good this year. I think he's only been sacked 3 times in 3 games. So it's not like guys are getting home against them. They haven't thrown the ball a ton. I think it really depends on situation on those guys. Because again, if you can get a mobile quarterback in a situation where he has to throw a lot, I think it's a lot of different. If your team gets down, the Bills are playing really good right now. I think this is going to be a heck of a matchup between the Bills and Ravens this weekend. I will tell you, I am playing him in this situation this week in a couple leagues. I know it's probably not the highest percentage play, but I like his opportunity to get home. And I'm like, I feel like he's really even with a couple other guys I have in my roster that I don't love a lot more. So I'm playing the talent, even though I know this is probably not an ideal situation.
And I finally realized why I was going down the linebacker tangent, because I was trying to talk about edge rushers or the outside linebackers. I get your point, JT. For me, my comfort level goes against mobile quarterbacks is I'd rather have the matchup be in favor of a mobile quarterback versus a base 3-3-4, where I know my edge rushers can get to the outside, play in coverage better than my inside linebackers in this situation. That's my take. But again, there is something to be said for trusting the talent. But JT brings up a very good point. Lamar Jackson is very hard to get on the ground there. So
it's a tough matchup this week. If you got better options, I would take them. If you're like, it's pretty close, I would play him this week. Like I said, I've got a couple leagues where I'm playing him. It's not an ideal matchup, but I am going to play him. If the Ravens get up in this game, it's going to be tough for him to see some sacks if they're running the ball as well as they ran the ball last week. But the Bills' defense has been really good, so.
So hopefully that answered your question, Ruguru. Hopefully you have other options. If not, you know what? Trust the talent, but temper expectations or fade your expectations. See what we did there? Playing pays and fades right now. Okay, I am so off on my jokes tonight, JT. I am sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Usually I'm a little more in tune, but I've been trying to read some of these offensive questions in the chat. So my ears, I'm like listening to you half as I'm trying to like answer trade questions in the
no. Just tell the people what you're doing. You're purposely avoiding because my jokes are that bad. It's fine. I get it. I would do the exact same thing. You're spot on. Okay. All right, let's get into some linebacker plays this week. And let me start us off here. Diane, I always forget how to pronounce his name because the stupid I in his name. Is it Dan Henley?
Yeah, I've heard it said quite a different way. I think it's like day in, like day in, even though it looks like Diane. I think it's like day in, but you're not going to be the only person that says it a different way. I've heard it so many different ways.
Okay, so anyhow, 12 total tackles last week, 9 solo, 3 assisted. Was the LB4 in Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, getting you 19.8 fantasy points. You look at the efficiency metrics, just nothing to write home about other than the fact that he had a 19.1% tackle rate, which is like bordering elite, which is freaking crazy, and played 100% of snaps. Again, another one of these guys who, if he's available on your waiver wire, he should not be. He should really not be. You should be going out on your IDP leagues if he's available. Probably not available in Dynasty leagues, but definitely available more than likely in your redraft leagues. Pick him up.
I tell you, he's kind of playing like I was hoping Junior Colson would, the rookie out of Michigan. I have Junior everywhere, and obviously had some injury stuff and had a medical issue in the preseason. And then is dealing with, I think, a hamstring right now. So this is kind of taking him out of the mix, which really crushed me because I was like, he was my defensive rookie of the year selection preseason. I just loved him. I drafted him probably way too high in a lot of IDP dynasty leagues, just because I really liked him. I still think he's going to be a long term, is going to be a really good player. If you have him, don't drop him. I'm in a league and I'm pissed about this. Somebody drafted him in the second round, right about where I had a pick, but I had made a trade, so I didn't get him. They dropped him last week. Junior Colson, they took him in the second round of our IDP Dynasty League, and they dropped him. And another guy in the league scooped him up. I didn't see it. I was like on the computer doing other stuff. He texted me. He's like, "Can you believe I got Junior Colson off the waiver wire?" I'm like, "What? What? What are you talking about?" I like jumped on there. I was like, I couldn't believe that I missed him. I was like, these are the things that kill you when you're in 50 leagues. I was like, man, because I love Colson. I just could not believe he got him. So if you're in the same situation, go out, get Henley, but do not drop Junior Colson unless you're in a redraft league.
Yeah, cosign. Ruger is back. He's like, so pick two, Rousseau, Burns, or McDonald. I'm going with the latter two, with Will McDonald and Brian Burns. McDonald going against Denver this week. That should be. If you like seeing quarterbacks get taken to the ground and made to eat dirt, all that old school stuff we can't say anymore because we have to be concerned about people who play a violent sport getting hurt. Then you'll be really excited to see Will McDonald play. And Brian Burns, I think you saw him wake up last week. Dak Prescott, again, can run, doesn't choose to run. First, he likes to stay in the pocket, probably a little bit too long. And that just only helps Brian Burns' opportunity versus Rousseau. Again, Lamar Jackson is just so hard to get down.
I like Rousseau, but Burns and McDonald for me in that scenario.
But I digress. I'm definitely interested in playing him this week. Dan Henley, D. Henley, the Washington State Cougar, however you want to. You know what? We're going to call him a kick-ass linebacker, the kick-ass linebacker out of Washington.
That works.
State. There you go. The kick-ass linebacker out of Washington State. You know who I'm talking about. All right. Anywho, who's your play at the linebacker position here, JT, this week?
The guy I'm playing, and I am just a little shocked that I keep seeing this guy, kind of overlooked with the start he's had. Right now, I think he's number 15 in Fantasy Pros scoring. Right now, he's a guy that, like, every time I go and look, and it's like, oh, here's his projected scoring in my IDP league. It's always crazy low, and I'm like, what? Why is his scoring so low? I'm like, man, I just want to tell people, ignore that projection because he's going to do a lot more than that. And that's EJ Speed. I've talked about it, just briefly brought it up earlier. The Colts are number one in the league in defensive plays. They are on the field the entire game because what has happened with the Colts? The Colts are either scoring a touchdown immediately or going 3 and out. Like they are not putting together long drives. They are 1, 2, 3 play drives. Or if they do put a long drive together, it's like 1 a game. They are not moving the ball. They're all big plays or nothing. The defense is just living on the field right now. And all the IDP guys, while I'm sure they would like a break, it's fantastic for IDP performance. So Speed this week so far, last week, 100% of snap share, first time all year, but he's been at 97, 99, 100%. Tackle wise, 10 in week 1 with 8 solos, 12 in week 2 with 8 solos, 12 last week with 6 solos. I don't think that goes down, especially against Pittsburgh, who is the most run heavy offense in the NFL. I think speed is going to be making a lot of plays. They're going to try to run the ball quite a bit in this one and try to control the Arthur Smith and the Steelers are going to try to control the clock. I want every Colts linebacker and safety I can play this week because I think they're going to have a lot of tackles this week.
All right, who is a fade for you at linebacker, really quick?
So the fade for me is Trenton Simpson. Got off to a nice start for the Ravens. We thought maybe he'd be that 1-for-1 trade out with Patrick Queen. His snap share has really plummeted the last 2 games after looking pretty good week 1. I was like, oh man, I'm really liking to see what I see out of Trenton Simpson. He went from playing 100% of snap share in week 2 to playing only 51% of snaps in week 3. He basically came off the field on every passing down, which is not a good sign, meaning this team doesn't trust him in pass coverage. Hopefully it's just an early season thing. He's a young guy, second-year player. Hopefully that he improves in that and that snap share stays up. But that makes me nervous for Ravens games if they get down in games that he is going to not see a lot of time on the field. So I'm not totally out on Trent Simpson, but for right now, I'm nervous. I'm fading him until I can see that snap share is going to be more consistent.
All right, let's go to our defensive backs. Defensive backs here for plays and fades. Let me give you mine, and it's refreshing seeing him come back to the world of playing in box safety situations versus being forced to play in slot coverage. Most importantly, it's great to see him having his fantasy production return. And talking about Jalen Petrie, weeks 2 and 3, 16 fantasy points off of 10 tackles. In week 2, 11.3 fantasy points off of 8 tackles and a pass deflection. What you really want to care about here is the where he's being lined up on the field, right? So if he's playing mostly in coverage, again, slot coverage, if you had your option between free safety, a wide corner, or a slot corner, you'd want the slot corner just because they're asked to cover a little bit more ground and running across the field. There's a lot of short to intermediate passes. Not every single contrary to what people think that this is a passing league in the NFL, not every single pass is like throwing 20 yards down the field. So you have those short to intermediate passes, which is where the slot corner feasts in getting those tackle numbers. But where the heart of the matter comes with when it comes to real, consistent tackle numbers is closer to a line of scrimmage or an area of the field we like to call it the box. And last week in week 3, he had a 46.8% box snap percentage. The next highest one on the team was Jimmy Ward with 33%. You saw Jalen Petrie return to relevance there. I'm really high on him this week. I think they've realized in back-to-back weeks, hey, let's put him in a spot where he actually can make plays and does really well. So he's my play for this week. In my fade, again, speaking of locations on the field where it matters, this one hurts. And this hurts you, JT, obviously more being a Colts fan, but we saw Julian Blackmon last year move over to strong safety and play closer to the line of scrimmage in the box, and rack up those tackle numbers. And now last week he only played 10% of snaps in the box. He's moving back into coverage because I think a player that you're talking about soon and may have written about over at fantasyandframes.com, which you can check out the article tomorrow morning for IDP plays and fades, is somebody that you're going to be talking about now.
Yeah, I think so. This is for the people that had Blackmon. It does hurt because he previously was a free safety on this team. They had moved him into the box safety last year, had kind of said this year he was going to stay in that box safety role. Injured his shoulder week 2. Kind of ended up having to try to figure out what they were going to do. They ended up moving Nick Cross to the box safety. And then when Blackmon came back, they decided, hey, we like Cross in the box safety, which is kind of funny because that's what they drafted him for. They originally drafted him to be the box safety and Blackmon to be the free safety, but they just hadn't got the kind of production and the play out of Cross that they wanted. So they moved Cross there because of the injury. Now they decided they really like Cross there. So now Nick Cross last week took 100% of the box safety snaps. He was in there the whole time. Blackman slides back. It helps Cross. It hurts Blackman. Now, most of your leagues at this point should have already jumped on and decided that Nick Cross is worth picking up. I mean, he leads the league in tackles. But I was in a couple leagues that no one had him yet. So I went and grabbed him in a few spots. But he has been fantastic, and I don't think it's going to stop. He's at nearly 100% of snap share this season. Like Jorge, like you said, kind of started free safety. Now he's playing the box safety on a team that cannot seem to stop the run, other than they were better last week against the Bears, but they've been terrible so far. So even with Cross playing the safety spot, he has just chalked up a ton of tackles this year, as he's already got 14 tackles in game 1, 15 in game 2, and then he had 10 with a pass deflection that turned into a pick in game 3 against Chicago. And now, again, like I just said with EJ Speed, Pittsburgh's going to run the ball. He's going to have a ton of opportunities to get double-digit tackles again. And again, I'm saying play EJ Speed. Yes. Should you play Cross too? Yes. Play your Colts players. The defense is out there constantly. And if you've seen the Steelers play, they've moved the ball well this year. They just haven't finished off drives. So they've been able to move the ball. They've kicked a lot of field goals. They haven't scored touchdowns. So they've held the ball a decent amount, where I think the Colts have the lowest offensive total of the year as far as time, offensive possession. Excuse me, I don't know why I messed that up. Offensive possession time, they're dead last in the league. So I think the Steelers hold the ball a lot in this game. I think the Colts defense is going to continue to struggle, and I think they're going to put up a lot of IDP numbers. So Nick Cross, go get him if he's still out there. And now you got him. Until something crazy happens, you got to play Nick Cross every week at this point.
All right, if Nick Cross is your play, who is your fade?
So my fade on this one, which I hate to say, I feel like I'm going after too many Washington Commanders players, so I apologize, Jorge. But Mike Saintsville, the rookie out of Michigan, a guy I like a ton. He was supposed to come in here and be the slot for these guys. I loved it. I was like, man, if you're in a start cornerback league, he was like one of my last picks in every rookie draft, because I was like, this guy can get you solid points. He's a takeaway machine. Well, we got off to a great start with him starting, and now that is not the case anymore. So last week, and I think it's less to do with him and more to do with the players around him. He has been moved back to the outside. Last week, he played 98.4% of his snaps at wide corner instead of slot corner. That's a huge discrepancy there. I like him as a player a lot, but I don't like this situation now. I really liked him at slot corner. I think the Commanders are not liking Emmanuel Forbes, who was a reach when they took him in the first round last year. He seems to be like he was the old coaching staff's guy. They really seem like they are not into him at all. They don't like him at all. He is not seeing the field. And I think that's where Saintsville, they thought, he'll play the slot corner. Forbes will play on the outside. That has not been the case. And so I think that move to me is more my fade than the fact that I don't like him as a player, because I do like him as a player, but man, unless you're throwing and getting 10, 12, 14 targets thrown at you a game as a 98% a wide corner, there's almost no way to play you in fantasy.
Well, there you go. And that concludes our plays and fades. We're going to forego sack lunch this week. Mostly because JT is kicking my ass and I need time to reevaluate some decisions here.
I can already tell you who I'm taking, because I've been talking about him the whole freaking show.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Nick Herbig. I'm taking Nick Herbig.
Okay, well, if we're going to do it, then I'm going to damn it. Now I got to scroll. Okay, here we go.
My bad. Preemptively jumped that for you. I wanted to do sack lunch, and you're like, now I was like, come on, let's do it.
Fine. Who are you taking, JT?
I'm taking Nick Herbig, Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's going to have a wonderful game. 2 sacks coming off the game, and I like him even against a pretty good Colts line and Anthony Richards, who's hard to bring down. I think Herbig gets home this week.
I'm going to go with the guy who's going to be also playing in that game on the opposite side. I'm going to go Liatu Latu. He got his first, I believe, sack this week. I think he goes for another one versus Justin Fields in this Pittsburgh defense. Before we go off air, though, got Angie in the chat. What's going on, Angie? Welcome to Shoot the Gap. Let me put her question on screen. I need two guys, Josh Allen Hines, Will McDonald, Will Anderson. Of course, we're taking starts and sits, but we call them plays and fades. No, I'm just kidding. You call them whatever you want, Angie. JT, why don't you go first, and I'll take the next two.
I have to tell you, I'm going to take McDonald. We've been talking about the whole time. I love what he's doing. I'm on Will Anderson this week, and part of the reason I'm on Will Anderson is I like him this week, but I also kind of out on Josh Allen Hines. So if you read my IDP article, I'll tell you why tomorrow if you want to read my plays and fades, but I'm out on Josh Allen Hines right now.
Ooh, that's what we call a tease in the biz. Actually, I don't know if that's what they call it, but that's what I'm calling it because you know what? What the hell? Anyhow, JT, as we've been talking this hour, we've gained 3 more YouTube subscribers here at the Fantasy and Frames channel, and we just want to say here on behalf of everybody at Fantasy and Frames, thank you very much for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, head on over there. We got waiver wire shows, we got Dynasty shows, we got in-season redraft shows, we got obviously Shoot the Gap, we got DFS shows. DraftKings DFS shows that are just phenomenal. Keith Fleming, Joe Matz, and Kevin Tompkins. They literally, folks, give you all the you need to know to go win some money this weekend. So definitely tune into those shows, and you can get notified by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell over on our YouTube channel. And then don't forget to head over to fantasyandframes.com and read all of our articles, plays and fades, waiver wire for college fantasy football, for IDP fantasy football, for redraft fantasy football. Hell, we have them for Dynasty fantasy football. I mean, we have them for everything. And not to mention our rankings. So head over to Fantasy and Frames. Anything Fantasy and Frames you see on the screen, X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere, we are there. Please subscribe, follow. We would really appreciate it. Before we get going, JT, anything you would like to plug this week that you got going on, or just in general?
Yeah, if you missed our Tuesday night college football betting show, jump on there and listen to that. If you're a betting fan, I'll have my NFL betting show coming up most likely on Friday, possibly late Thursday night. You got to see what my day kind of works out tomorrow, what I can make happen, but check that out. And then if you're into hockey, hockey season is right around the corner. You can listen to Around the Ice Tuesday nights here on Fantasy and Frames.
All right. And for me, I think I plugged the Fantasy and Frames a lot. Definitely enjoy Around the Ice. If you go on YouTube Music, the app, you type in Fantasy Hockey, Around the Ice with JT and the guys, the number 2 Fantasy Hockey populated search engine result there. So that's pretty awesome. Let me just get to one more comment here. First time watcher, Alvin. Alvin, thank you so much. First time watcher, y'all are awesome. No, Alvin, you're awesome. Thank you very much for your support. Come back next week. We're here every week. Thank you for sharing your insights. That's what we're here for, Alvin. Hopefully, if you're into fantasy football, hopefully we helped you. If you're not into fantasy football, you know what? Hopefully you were entertained. Speaking of entertained, though, I'm going to plug one thing. Transformers 1. Yes, it's a cartoon movie. I don't care. Probably one of the best Transformers movies that's come out in, I'll say, the past, century. So Alvin says he'll be back. Yes, he'll be back because he's going to go watch Transformers 1 right now. Go check it out. Great movie. Highly recommend. So for JT, I'm Jorge. We'll see you next week, next Wednesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern here on Shoot the Gap.